and see if anybody else comes. So you want to go ahead and start recording?
Yes.
And I'll welcome everybody and pray. So a couple of announcements. Needle's Eye, once upon a time, owned this building. They sold the building some time ago and have been renting it back until they figure out where they're going. They have figured out where they're going, and they are getting that new location ready. And so at some point in the next few months, we will not be able to meet here, I think, because Needle's Eye will no longer be hosting us here. But I feel fairly confident, although I haven't asked the question directly, we'll still be able to use Needle Eye's new location. But I will have to give you all more detail about that. But just be aware.
Where's it going to be? Where's it?
I don't have an address yet.
Don't hope it's too far. Not too far.
But it certainly have appreciated Needle's Eye making this facility available to us. So let me pray. Father, we ask that you would work in each one of us and help us, Lord, to see that it's beyond the intellectual discussions and debates, that there is an issue of the heart here. And help us to incline our hearts to being committed to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we're going to give an apologetic overview tonight that kind of shows just lots of the different avenues of argumentation, discussion about apologetics that give evidence, arguments for the existence of God, the veracity of the Bible. I mean, there's a whole set of arguments. But of course, as I've been doing, in the months past, I have a story. But tonight's story, are we ready to?
We lived in a very small little house, a little small terraced house. Our office was in our home. We had our first son, and it was a bit tight. We needed somewhere bigger, and we started looking around. We went and saw a house. We walked into this house, and even though the price of the house was way more than what we had and what we could afford, we really felt we should go and see this house. So we see the house, we walk around the house, and then my wife and I, we just go into one of the rooms to have a little conversation, and we both said, this is the house. This is the house. Even though way above what we had. And we felt the Lord said to us, in that moment, don't negotiate the price, don't offer a lower price, give them what they're asking for. So we met the couple, we said, we'd love to buy the house and we'll give you what you're asking for. And they were delighted and we shook hands on it and it was great. Anyway, I then contact our solicitor, who's a friend of ours called Costa, and I tell him about that house and he goes, John, do tell me, you haven't got the money. I said, no, I haven't got the money. He goes, oh no. And I said, I want a solicitor who prays. And he's like, I'm your solicitor. I said, well, you got to pray for the money. I haven't got the money. I need some money. Anyway, so he's like, I got him on me as well. The next day, the couple ring us, right? Now, the couple's Jewish. And he says to me, oh, Mr. John, since you left yesterday, we had 3 other people visit the house and they've offered us higher price than what we'd asked. So if you're willing to match the higher price, we'd love to give it to you. So I said, okay, let me talk to my wife. So I talked to Killy, we pray about it. I ring him back. I said, listen, my wife and I just prayed about it and Yahweh, remember they're Jewish, I said, Yahweh said, stay at the offer that we made for you. And he said, you talked to Yahweh, did you? I said, I did. And I said, Yahweh knows what you're doing. And he told me to stay at the offer that you agreed. And he said, you tell Yahweh you're not going to get the house. So I said, I actually don't need to tell Yahweh anything. He knows what you just said. And that ended the conversation. I was a little bit disheartened, a bit discouraged. We both were convinced this was the house. It was the house. Anyway, well, we got it wrong. We got it wrong. A week later, he phones up again. He says, Mr. John, you're not going to believe this. My wife and I have not slept for a whole week. We want you to have the house at the price we agreed. I said, shall I tell Yahweh? He said, I think Yahweh already knows. Well, of course Yahweh already knows. Wait a minute, there's more to the story. There's more to the story. We've got this massive shortfall, right? I'm in regular contact with our solicitor, Costa. Anyway, I ring him up. I said, back on, Costa. He goes, have you got the money? I said, no. He says, right, come and see me tomorrow. So the next day, we make an appointment to go and see our friend, the solicitor, Costa. The next morning, the post arrives before we go and see Costa. And my wife gets a letter from her godmother. And her godmother wrote to her, and we've not been in contact with her godmother, like, for years. And the godmother wrote several days before and said, Killy, I was praying for you and John today, and the Lord told me that the money I had assigned for you in my will when I died, he told me to send it to you now. Is it useful? Is it useful? We go into Costa's office. I said, Costa, did you pray? He goes, I did. I slapped the check on this table. There it is. And it was exactly what we needed to bridge the difference.
This same video for a little Bible study group that I have, and that I ask how people reaction, and one of the guys says, I don't know, is this really real? I mean, so the issue is in his experience, he's never had anything like that happen at all. Okay, so it just does not resonate as being even possibly true with him. I, however, have had a number of things in my life that resonate with that. And so when I hear an account like this, I say, yeah, I believe this is how God has done this. But there are lots of questions. Do you guys, anybody, you guys does that raise any questions, any puzzles? The big picture, like, why doesn't God do this for everybody all the time?
Well, maybe because they didn't pray.
Maybe they don't pray. That is exactly right. Maybe they don't.
Well, you'll hear people all the time, like how they met their spouses, by some bizarre coincidence. They didn't want to go out, they weren't feeling well, but their friend dragged them, and then the guy's friend dragged him. He didn't want to go out, and they had never been to this place before, and now they're happily married and have a family. I mean, throughout your life, you'll hear people tell you stories like of really bizarre coincidences, like it had to be fate or God intervening.
But a story like this is a little beyond coincidence.
Yeah.
With the timing of the letter, and the fact that here's this guy who's obviously trying to scam him. He's they didn't have 3 more offers. He's just calling up and saying that we got a higher offer. And the fact that God, I would say God didn't let him sleep. And so from an apologetic point of view, this to me is where in having a relationship with God through Christ becomes real. And so, as I said before, I'll probably say it again in these meetings. My objective in these meetings is not just to bounce around with the intellectual issues. My real desire is that people will have a heart engagement with God through Jesus Christ. But I also know that, as C.S. Lewis said, the heart cannot embrace what the mind rejects as false. And so all these other things that we talk about are really just dealing with things that might get in the way of actually trusting God. Any questions or comments here before we go on with the actual presentation? Yes,
Well,
Steve.
I don't want to throw cold water on it or anything, but I do look at things like this as episodic, single point evidence without any substantial proof that he's accurate about what he said. So if I were to look at a video like this, just presented to me like you did, I'd want to know, who is this character? Does he have a history of telling stories like this? Is there any shade of possible doubt that I would be suspicious that maybe he's trying to convince the audience and have faith and embellish the story? I'm a little bit of a skeptic like that.
Mhm.
So I want to be careful about just swallowing that, right, just because it was presented to me.
Well, you can go online, put in YouTube, and put in J.John, and you'll get a bunch of him, and they're clips of stories just told. Not all about him. He's got some about missionaries and various other stories. But he's a good storyteller. And I think that they are. Um, I think they're factual. Unless he sort of gives you the clue that this is just illustrative. But here, he's saying this is his personal experience, and so I think he's saying, yeah, this is how it happened. So
The only other story I heard from him was a story about a cat that.
I saw that one too.
Yes, and I'm not quite sure whether that was
Yeah.
totally real.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that one either.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's go on here and talk about the discussion. So we switch to here we are. So this is kind of an outline of the issues, and this is not a complete list, but you can see you can talk about the cosmos. Various types of evidence point toward a creator. Is one of the things we would argue. The issue of life, its origin, its design, and their evolutionary conundrums. So how do you explain that? And it's a lot of puzzles there. There's some non-physical issues. How do you explain consciousness, moral sense, right and wrong? There's no length, width, height, mass to the sense of morality, love, reason, and free will, those kind of things. Then you can talk about the Bible. There's archaeology that supports it. You can get into a comparison of what other holy book has similar archaeological support. There are questions that you can get into there. The life of Jesus and the change lives of biblical characters or change lives of people today. You can talk about that. Miracles and answer prayer, one of which we just heard a story of. So we're going to go through some of these very briefly. Obviously, you could talk about most of these things for a couple hours each. So we're not going to have time to delve into any of them, but I hope over the year, next couple of years, we can dive into some of these a little more. So first is logic. If anything exists at all, then something must have the quality of self-existence. I'm going to pause. Let's think about that for just a second. So that means if there was absolutely nothing, no matter, no energy, no space, no time, if there was nothing, if you can have a hard time imagining it, then you would always have nothing. So if anything exists at all, which it does, then something has to have the quality of self-existence. And we're going to call that God. And so the question, does God exist? Well, by my definition, it does. God exists. Now we just talk about what is God like? Because something is self-existent, we're going to say that's God. Biblically, God created the heavens and the earth, and so you could say, well, whatever it is that caused the heavens and the earth to come into existence, that's God. And now we can talk about what does that look like. But that is where you can start. So the evidence that we have points toward a transcendent origin of the universe. Could be explained by an impersonal cosmic foam multiverse, but it could be explained by a purposeful creator. There are people who don't like the first creator so they would opt for the cosmic foam. And perhaps there are people who can't comprehend a cosmic foam, so they say, "Well, I think it was God." So we can debate that.
Foam?
Hmm?
Foam?
Yes, a cosmic foam. So think of a foam like bubbles. Like if you blow bubbles, you get all thousands of these bubbles, and it would be kind of foaming, or like beer, foam on beer, except that every bubble is a universe. So it's this massive, eternal, seething of universe bubbles. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The constants of physics are fine-tuned to form stars and planets, and that could be explained because there could be an infinite number of these multiple universes, and we just happen to get we're the lucky one. Okay, that's a possibility. Or it could be that it was a god. That's a possibility. Here we have a couple of quotes here. Modern thinking is that time did not start with the Big Bang, and that there was a multiverse even before the Big Bang. In the inflation theory and in string theory, there were universes before our Big Bang, and that Big Bangs are happening all the time. Universes are formed when bubbles collide or fission into smaller bubbles. Okay?
Modern thinking.
Yeah, yes, that's modern thinking. Fred Hoyle, though, who was, by the way, at different times an atheist, and I think possibly a pantheist at different points, says a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with the physics. So he didn't buy into the Christian God by any means, but he did recognize that the fine tuning is such that it points towards something else. Chemistry allows biochemistry. We take it for granted. We don't think about it much, but for us to have chemistry that produces amino acids and nucleotides and lipids of various kinds, you need to have the strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, electromagnetic constant, the electron charge, the Planck's constant, and a whole lot more other things all lined up. So the chemistry allows biochemistry, and that in itself should point toward some sort of purposeful tinkering, if you will. Where did all this fine tuning come from? Well, you could have this big bingo game going on here, and we just got all the numbers, except this isn't line up a row, it's you got to fill the whole card. Okay? And there are lots and lots of numbers that I haven't mentioned here. So we could explain it as the lucky draw, or it could be God. Paul Davies, who was also, he's not a Christian, but he says scientists are slowly waking up to an inconvenient truth. The universe looks suspiciously like a fix. This issue concerns the very laws of nature themselves. Then the next one, the fine-tuning of the universe provides prima facie evidence of deistic design. Now notice this guy doesn't say theistic design. He's saying, but some God had to set this up and then let it go. It's just got too much that's too aligned. Richard Dawkins, who's an evolutionary biologist, the other way is a multiverse way. That says that maybe the universe we are in is one of a very large number of universes. The vast majority will not contain life because they have the wrong gravitational constant or the wrong this constant or that constant. But as the number of universes climbs, the odds mount that a tiny minority of universes will have the right fine tuning. Okay, so we don't need God. But God's a possibility here. The very Earth that we live in here. In 1994 and before, there were 8 planets that were confirmed, and 1 was known to have life. 1994, there was a planet orbiting a pulsar that was confirmed. Nobody even suggested that there might be life on a planet orbiting a pulsar. Okay, but we found a planet. 1995, a planet confirmed orbiting a star. By 2016, we had Kepler 1410 detected having an 84% habitability rating. There's a long discussion. What do you mean by habitability rating? Okay, we're not going to dive deep down into that one tonight. But by 2025, this year, there are over 5,800 confirmed exoplanets. One with a life. Okay, So biblically, the earth is neither lucky nor an accident. Biblically, as Isaiah says, for thus says the Lord who created the heavens, he is the God who formed the earth and made it. He established it and did not create it a waste place, but formed it to be inhabited. So biblically, we're saying the world we walk around in is not an accident. Let's just take a quick look at a couple of planets here. Here is T-Garden B, and there's people get excited about this. It's around a red dwarf star, 9% the mass of the sun, about 12.5 light years away. It has an Earth similarity index, an ESI, of 0.9. Okay, so we're moving on along here. It's at the inner edge of the habitable zone. It's significantly larger. Some people, there's some debate on the size. So the error bars are pretty wide here. Has a period of 4.91 Earth days. Means it goes around its star every 4 days. That's pretty close, folks.
You should mention that that's an artist rendition.
Oh yes, this is an artist rendition. Nobody's taken a picture. It's for size. It's for size comparison.
Well, then you said the mass is minus 1.05.
No, not minus. That's a hyphen. I'm sorry.
1.05 E.
The Earth.
So that's a much smaller difference than that picture seems to show.
This is showing the volume, not the mass. So it doesn't have much density.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
Sounds like a gaseous.
well. That's a discussion. There could be a lot of elements. You see,
Oh.
see the red dwarf is actually what's called metal poor.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have a lot of heavy elements.
Yeah.
So it may have a lot of the lighter elements that are in it. But nonetheless, people are excited about this. And this diameter is debatable. And notice they've estimated the temperature to be 82 degrees Fahrenheit average. The average temperature of the Earth is 59 degrees. This is a pretty warm place. We're concerned that the average temperature of Earth might go up 4 degrees. Yeah, and then climate change is going to destroy us all. Well, they're already up like 25 degrees.
I guess that's because if they're rotating around their sun in 5 days, they must be very close to it, right?
Yes.
How could they not burn out? I'm surprised. That sun must be very weak if they're so
Yeah,
close.
that's correct. In fact, let's go on to the next one here. Talking about T-Garden B, this is the star. Okay, it's guaranteed to be. The B is the planet, guaranteed to be tidally locked, so there's no magnetic field, and that's because it's so close in. And tidally locked means that one face of the planet constantly faces the star. So as it goes around the star, it rotates in time. Temperatures and inference, lots of assumptions. So wide error bars on the temperature. The star does have low metallicity, which means it has low carbon and low nitrogen probably. You're not making much life without carbon and nitrogen. That's another discussion. Life as we don't know it. We can talk about that. We don't know anything about the atmosphere, plate tectonics, eccentricity, magnetic field, chemical composition, or meteor impact. I say magnetic field. I say there isn't one. But I say that as an inference because it's not rotating, it's tidally locked. And because it doesn't have the heavy metals to have an iron core and have uranium and thorium to keep it warm to make the magnetic field. Without the magnetic field, it loses its atmosphere. Here is TOI 700D. TOI is TESS object of interest. So TESS is a telescope. It's again a red dwarf, but it's larger. It's 40% the mass of, should be the mass of the sun. Error there. 100 light years away. ESI, Earth Similarity Index of 0.94. Okay, it's at the inner edge of the habitable zone. I'm going to zoom in on this picture in a minute. Has a period of 37.4 Earth days, so it's a little further out. And it's closer to the Earth diameter, has an average temperature of 82 degrees. Okay, so maybe this could work. So this is where it is. TOID is this line right here, and see it is on the very inner edge of the habitable zone as they're estimating it. Am I blocking you, Dave? And they have a conservative habitable zone, and then they have an optimistic habitable zone in the yellow area. So planet D is right at the very edge. Now the thing about habitable zones, it's got a lot of that depends built into it. The stars, as stars are born and age, they change temperature, so the habitable zone shrinks and moves in and out. So historically, this is probably the planet's probably had its atmosphere blown away long ago when the star was not stable. Because early, so we look at the star now and it's pretty stable. That doesn't mean it was stable a few million years ago. So it probably is not a good place. It's guaranteed to be mostly tidally locked. And what happens is in certain situations is it's not tidally locked in a 1-to-1 resonance. It could be a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1, so that every 3 times that it makes a rotation around the star, it makes a revolution. The M-type stars usually have lower carbon and nitrogen, also low in iron. So again, it probably has no magnetic field to protect it. Again, the temperature is an inference, all the same things. We don't know anything about those things. And so the fact that we give it an Earth similarity index is there are about 3 factors that we can talk about. And on those 3 factors, it's 90, we'll give it a 94. Okay, but the other things we haven't got a clue about. So I'm not overly impressed with Earth similarity index of 94. Characteristics of the planet. Well, we have the right mass, that chemical composition, atmosphere. We have plate tectonics. We have a single moon. We have a magnetic field. We can go through a long list of things. It could be explained by dumb luck. We just happen to get the right star. We are in the habitable zone, and we've been in the habitable zone for billions of years, actually. So that in itself is a little odd. Could be God. The habitability for advanced life depends upon the earlier forms of life. Advanced life, and this is another discussion. We actually have a speaker lined up to come talk about what he calls weird life. He is a theoretical chemist, and we'll talk about what's the possibility of life that doesn't use carbon. What is the possibility of life that doesn't need water as a solvent? And what are some of the things that are there? But for billions of years on Earth, the single-celled organisms were moving heavy metals from the oceans and making deposits, producing nitrogen and producing oxygen to make the atmosphere that we have. Here's what Carl Sagan said: the origin of life on Earth or anywhere else may have been inevitable. Life arose on Earth almost as soon as the environment permitted. Think about that logic for just a minute. Because it did not take very long, it must be easy. Is that right? I saw, when I took a class one time on project management, and they played a video. Apparently somebody had a contest. How fast can you build a move-in ready house? Okay. No limit on the expenses. Just how fast can you do this? Winning time, 3 hours and 20 minutes. Okay. We watched the video. We didn't watch 3 hours and 20 minutes of video, but they showed part of this. You know, they had very expensive, quick drying cement for the concrete. As soon as they said go, you had dozens of carpenters there that are building the frames. You had the roof in the background, carpenters putting that thing up and putting shingles on it before it was even on top of the house. Okay, you had the plumbers that are there. You had the inspectors who were there. You didn't have to wait till next week to get the inspector. And the plumbers are going in, the electricians are going in as fast as you can. Everybody is coordinated. It is a choreographed operation. A crane comes in when they're ready to put the roof on, picks up the roof. The carpenters are still on the roof, hanging on. They lift the roof up and set it into place, and those carpenters go back to work putting on all the shingles. Okay, 3 hours and 20 minutes, house is move-in ready. So the fact that something takes a long time or it happens quickly doesn't mean that it's easy. This took an enormous amount of planning and design.
John, I love I love how much is hidden behind almost as soon as the environment permitted. I mean, it's just like you'd have to take into effect on your analogy all the training of those carpenters, all the building of the crane, all the millennia of understanding of physics to make a crane like that.
Yeah.
All of that is part of the prehistory of that house.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that's being glossed over with almost as soon as the environment permitted.
Yeah. So when you hear quotes like that, you need to pause and say, okay, I just need to think about this just a little bit. Even though the guy has a PhD behind his name, and I do not, I would still say, I think you're making some bad assumptions here. Okay, how to judge the difficulty of the origin of life? Well, it happens really quickly, so it must be easy. Or you make a project plan, and I would defy you. Come up with a project plan. Do this. I've actually tried it. It is not a trivial matter. What are your dependencies? And you got first and second order feedback loops. You have maintenance processes. Okay, I'm going to let loose. I'm going to give you a fully functioning kitchen. Okay, you can make anything you want, but you don't have a trash can. You don't have any soap. You don't even have a sponge. You don't have anything to clean anything up. Okay? How long is this kitchen going to stay functional? You have to have the maintenance processes from the very beginning, or it doesn't work. And that takes a lot of anticipation, which is why, when my mom would cook, she was finished with dinner and the kitchen was clean. Now, when I first started cooking, I'm finished with dinner and it is a giant disaster. I have to go back in and then clean. But my mom, no, she did it as she went along. Okay, the origin of life and biochemical design. It could be necessity and chance. There's a paper out there that you can read, or actually my books on it, that everything can be explained by either necessity or chance. It had to be that way or simply chance. Those are the only two options. But it could be a purposeful creator. And I would suggest to you that something like an automobile, a 747, an airplane, it was not necessary, and it is not chance. Those things were designed. So to say that everything is either necessity or chance, no. Some things are purposefully designed. And the amino acids, lipids, the homochirality issue, the genetic code, I could make this list very long, but you have your choice of explaining it this way, or possibly it could be God.
John, what does necessity mean, though? Does it mean, like, don't you need to have something to be necessary for, or somebody to, like, what is the context of being necessary?
Well, it's that there's no other way that it could be. That if I throw a ball up, it will come down. That is a necessary function. It may be chance exactly where it lands, but it is a combination of the necessity, because gravity is going to make it come down, so there is no option there. Okay. If I put hydrogen and oxygen together and light a match, I can tell you what's going to happen. It's necessary that they combine. It may be simply chance that this particular atom and that particular atom combine, but it's necessary. You can't avoid it. Okay. But it's not necessary that you have automobiles or trains or air conditioners or those things. They're neither necessary nor did they happen by chance. And so the whole universe, life, You say, well, it's got to be one of these two. No, it doesn't. There's an evolutionary gauntlet if you're going to talk about evolution, and you can say that these various things you got to run the gauntlet here, and in this picture, you're going to get stabbed with spears as you run through the gauntlet. Okay, all you got to do is make it through alive. Okay, well, you got to get the first life. We're not going to deal with the origin life; that's a separate issue. But you got to get from a prokaryotic cell, one without a nucleus, to a eukaryotic cell, which has all kinds of organelles. You then have to go from a single cell to a multi-cell, which it requires intercellular communication that has to be coordinated. You have the Cambrian explosion. There's sexual reproduction. That is actually very. How did that come about? You can look it up on the internet and find a bunch of stuff written, and as far as I can see, nobody has given a plausible explanation. You got to go from amphibian to reptile, from reptile to mammal. You got every transition that's in there. All those things have to happen, and you can say, well, there are gaps in our knowledge, and so an unknown explanation does not mean there is no explanation. So it's basically, trust us, we will explain this.
Science of the gap.
Yes, it's the science of the gaps. Whereas they would, of course, say, well, you're claiming the God of the gaps. I'm saying there is a gap, but I'm saying that the gap is of a nature that it's not just that you haven't explained it yet. I don't think it can be explained.
Anybody can postulate anything then, if you depend on future discovery, the gap in the future discoveries. But
Yeah.
you say, whatever problem you run across, you say, well, they'll discover that later. I mean, you can do anything.
Yeah. Well, and there are people that have that position.
Mhm.
Okay. There are non-physical realities: consciousness, our sense of self, moral sense, love and hate. You're going to have to explain all of these non-physical things as emergent properties of physical things. Okay, and can people do that? Well, again, they say, well, it's a complex problem, and we're working on it, but we don't need to postulate God yet. Okay, well, I think God is already in the picture because of a lot of other things. So I'm not just bringing it up for that. Then you get to the Bible. And the Bible is really the only holy book that is historically based, making enough claims in the text that you can verify it. If you look at the Book of Mormon, for example, nothing has ever been discovered archaeologically which would support it. You look at the Quran, it makes almost no statements that can be discovered to be true or false based upon archaeology. Whereas the Bible, in fact, has many, many. You look at the Hindu Vedas, the Upanishads, the same kind of thing. You can't say, well, when exactly did this happen? And give me a city and a date and a time. Tie it to other external events, and you can't do that. So that historical reliability supports the inspiration of the scripture. Or you could say, well, it doesn't mean anything because there are key events that aren't supported. That's right, there are events in the Bible that there is no support for. That's true. But where there is evidence, the evidence proves to be consistent. The testimony of changed lives. You can say, well, why isn't everyone changed? That's an interesting question. Maybe it has something to do with us as to why I'm not changed. Lots of Christians are major jerks. Okay, I'll even agree to that. I'll even say I may be one of them. But people's lives change for lots of reasons, so you can't use that as proof. But it could point to the fact that God is still active. When you look at, say, the example of Saul on the road to Damascus, here is a man who was steeped in Jewish culture. For him he was persecuting the church. For him to turn around, how do you explain that? How do you explain the various other lives, even my own turnaround? And you can say, well, there are a lot of reasons that people change, and maybe somebody, could give you testimony of how Islam changed their life. And that may be true. But here's the interesting question. Today, we could do a session on this. I can bring in a DVD. We can play some videos of Muslims who give a testimony of how Jesus Christ appeared to them in dreams. Why isn't Buddha appearing to anybody in dreams? Why isn't Muhammad appearing to anybody in dreams? Well, my explanation is because Jesus is still alive and the others are not. So you can explain it away, or you can say, yeah, it actually seems to be pointing toward God. Miracles. Well, you can say miracles can't be proven scientifically, and I can actually agree with that. I can't prove them scientifically. And many miracles have been disproven. Well, you can disprove a lot of miracles, and that doesn't disprove them all. But if there are miracles of some kind, that says that God is still active today. So an answered prayer might be in that. The very message of the Bible can point to being a purposeful creator, that God created man in his image. Man used his freedom to rebel. The creator came as Jesus. Jesus died to reconcile us to God. Jesus rose from the dead. Well, you can't believe all those things. Those were just ignorant people who wrote that thousands of years ago. You can explain it away, or perhaps it points toward a purposeful creator. The life and resurrection of Jesus. The empty tomb. Nobody has really given a good explanation for the empty tomb, other than the fact that Jesus actually rose from the dead. You can say, well, there have been other people who claim to have come from God. That's true. Other people have claimed. Other traditions claim various kinds of resurrections. But you know what? They don't have an empty tomb. They don't have apostles who died proclaiming this. Okay? So there are some things that are distinct about the resurrection of Jesus. And of course, answered prayer today. So the overall picture here is that you can explain these things away by a dozen different reasons. Or maybe they all point toward God. And I think that's the thing, if you wanted to go with what's called Occam's razor, where the simplest explanation is the one that is probably right. If God explains all these things, rather than having all the different various explanations, why not give that a serious credibility? And here are some, as I end most of these little talks, I give you some books to read. Why the Universe is the Way It Is, that's a big, this is big picture kind of stuff. Beyond the Cosmos, it talks about the transdimensionality of God and what the implications of that are. God Among Sages is a imagined discussion of Jesus with other religious leaders. How does Jesus, how the recorded words of Jesus respond to some of the things that Buddha or whoever else may have said? Without a doubt, answering the 20 toughest faith questions. So you can spend a lot of time reading. I have, and we'll end there and open it up for any kind of questions or discussion.
Well, you use the term infinity. I don't think there's such thing as infinity, but that was at the beginning. There, even if something's quintillions and quintillions, I don't think that we use the concept of infinity where something is just so large, or there's so large a number we just can't comprehend. But I think everything is finite, right? There can't be. There. If you could possibly count somehow, you had some super calculator, you could finally get to the final number of the number of stars in the universe, right?
Right. No, there are lots of theoretical mathematicians who would agree that there is no such thing as an actual physical infinity. It's useful as a concept, but it does not actually exist in any physical form.
Now, if we're talking about a creator who created life on Earth and everything's so perfect and all, why did he have to go to creating all these other stars and other universes? What purpose did they serve? They're just rocks floating around. and there's so few places to have
You
light.
want me to go?
Yeah, I want to go back.
Like, why would we go through all these efforts?
Yeah, just, I'm gonna,
Okay.
oops, I want to go the other, no, I want to go this way. So this book responds to that question, but let me give you,
Yeah,
just,
okay.
let me give you a little response. I believe that God wanted to create a universe where he could create beings in his own image, that they would have free will. For us to have free will, there needs to be a set of laws that operate so that God is not pushing around every hormone in my body directly.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm a puppet
Yeah.
in that regard. So for God to do that and to create the universe had to start out with its own laws. And so in order for there to be a single star like ours with a single planet, you need to have all these other stars and galaxies in order for there to be by laws of physics and chemistry, for all that to happen, for us to have one planet. So it's not just arbitrary. He wasn't just showing off. The heavens declare the glory of God. They do, but I think there's a certain amount of necessity that he had to have this if he's going to create free will beings in a universe that is governed by laws which he himself created. It's a very short answer. We can go around in circles on it.
So, for example, he had to have an area in which our solar system came together that came from other stars having already gone through nova that created enough heavy elements that we had a core in our Earth that would sustain, magnetic field and plate tectonics and everything. But those other elements had to come from someplace.
Right,
And
and
we were being stars.
even if you postulate, well, God could have just done that. Just bam, there's our star, there's our planets, nothing else. Okay, well, that's not being done by the very laws which are governing the star and the planet. So when God started the universe, he started it and it obeys his laws. Now, when I say it obeys his laws, that does not exclude the possibility of him intervening there. So God can very sovereignly choose to intervene. Am I addressing your actual question, Robert?
Yeah, you're trying to. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Recognizing the effort, thank you.
One thing is back in the last century, the end of the last century, it was discovered that if the mass of the universe had to be fine-tuned in order for us to be here, a planet, something like that, to a very fine amount. If it varied by more than that amount, you wouldn't be here. That amount was 1 dime. That's for the universe now.
Say that again, 1 dime?
A dime, 2.7 grams.
Mass of a dime. In the very beginning, it's so finely tuned that
Yes.
at 1 dime worth of more mass,
Or less.
or less, it wouldn't have come together.
No.
In the way it is.
But then, in 1999, they discovered what 70% of the mass of the universe really is. 70% of the stuff is dark energy. And that's what makes the universe expand. Gravity wants to do this, dark energy is making it do this. And about 7 billion years ago, it tipped to the point where it's expanding. It'll never collapse. And it's accelerating today. And so they figure, okay, well, we needed 1 times 10 to the negative, balance within 1 times 10 to the negative 60. It's pretty impressive, 60 zeros. Okay. Well, it turns out you could vary that a little more than that, but the dark energy, which is 70% of the universe stuff, has to be fine-tuned to 1 over 1 times 10 to the negative 120 or 122 zeros.
Yeah, so
it just got a lot more complicated. So that is about 1 times 10 to the negative 40 of an atom. That's how fine-tuned it has to be, and that's been verified.
So the analogy, if you want an analogy, is if you were shooting at a target. The farther away the target is, the more accurate your angle has to be. If you're going to hit it, you're off by just a little bit of an angle, you're going to miss the target by a long ways if the target is miles away. So for at the very beginning, if you think of it as there as a certain explosive force, there's a certain mass of the universe, and there's a certain gravitational effect. And what Wayne is saying is that keeping those other things constant, if you change the mass of the universe by one dime, it wouldn't work. You wouldn't have life anywhere in the universe at any time. Now, if you changed it by one dime and you changed something else, maybe you could make it work. But keeping everything else constant, it is very finely tuned.
But that's before dark energy.
Yes.
Now we added another 62 zeros to it.
So my answer to your question, and I've asked it, like, why did God create dinosaurs, right? I mean, and the answer is that I've come to conclude is that because he can, he's great, and these things that he's created show his greatness. It is as vast as the universe is. We couldn't possibly imagine how a being could do something like that. So it just adds to the character of God and his greatness.
Also Exxon.
Exxon, yes. Also, you can have oil.
Yeah.
I was just thinking.
Seriously, that's actual consideration.
Yeah. Go to Bob.
One of the retorts to this discussion that you reviewed earlier has to do with the multiverse theory, and we're just that there were an infinite number of possibilities, or near infinite, whoever was questioning that, near infinite number of possibilities, and we just happen to be. The more possibilities you have, the more likely it is that one of them will produce this universe with all its constants, and that's usually an attempt to counter the apparent theistic implications of the fine-tuned universe.
Right.
But it doesn't work, I think, as well as with that retort does not address an even bigger picture. It sort of just pushes things back one level, because the strongest forms of the cosmological argument aren't about God creating something in the beginning and it sort of lasts. It's how do you explain existence at all? If you have a multiverse, allegedly, that may explain how this universe is fine-tuned, because it would have had to have happened at some point. But this multiverse itself, you can conceive of that not existing. It doesn't have its own internal rationale for being present. So you still would have to give an account to this question of why is there anything at all rather than nothing, and you can't appeal to that multiverse to explain. You can appeal to that to explain this universe, but you can't appeal to that to explain the multiverse itself, right? So it just really, that retort only opens up a whole nother a range of issues that I think a lot of people like Dawkins it doesn't even occur to them.
Well, see, so what the debate there is, what is the brutest of the brute facts? Is it God's existence, or is it the multiverse existence? That the person would have to say, the brute fact beyond which you can't go is the multiverse exists. And the multiverse's nature is such that it spawns universes. That's its nature. On the other hand, the brute fact could be a purposeful God. And but if there's a multiverse, how do you explain the origin of life? No purpose. Yeah. So you look at life, living things. Does a spider spin a web for a purpose?
Its own purpose.
Okay. Do you think the spider is purposeful in the same way that we are conscious of purpose? It's doing this by instinct. Where does that come from? Where does that purposefulness come from? But it's not just at the level of the spider, it's at the level of the tree, the leaf on the tree. Every creature, whatever instinct it is, when you have a little infant and you brush its mouth, and it just instinctively starts to suck. Is that purposeful? Yes, it's purposeful. where does the baby get that instinct? And so well, I didn't have it up here, but instincts, animal instincts and automatic behaviors of plants, um, where does that come from?
I don't think it's in the DNA.
You don't think
I
it
don't
is?
It's in DNA.
No, it's actually, it transcends the DNA. Yeah, it's beyond the DNA.
Who wrote the code?
Yeah, yes, and the code is not just the DNA, which is another discussion. Um, so let me just see if I can
Like,
say.
could they genetically engineer a dog that the offspring wouldn't bark, that they could take away the barking instinct? Is that, I know, do they have the technology now that they could isolate the barking gene?
No, I don't think they do, but it's conceivable that they could do that. But it wouldn't just be that. What they would probably find is that, oh, you muck around with that gene and it changes 6 other things too. Okay, so there's a lot of interrelationships here, and when you stop and think about it, the genetic code is really a parts list. And if you took some some kit furniture, and it gives you a parts list, but it doesn't have any quantities. Okay, it just says you have a screw like this and a screw. There's no quantities. Well, the DNA doesn't tell you the quantities. The DNA doesn't tell you where it's supposed to go. The DNA simply says this is what the part looks like. Okay, where is that? Where's all that other information? All that other information is based upon the configuration of the cell and the proteins that are currently in the cell. And so that's all information that's not in the DNA. It's vast, very vast. And so even if you come up with the amino acids and the lipids, what was the other?
Nucleic acids?
And the nucleic acid, and the nucleic, even if you have all those,
yeah.
and I give you the DNA, where is all the molecules that control the reading of the DNA?
Yeah.
See, and so every hormone that you have in your body carries information. It's the information that demands of life are incredible.
Jonathan, something was last name. Was he the one that said, if you take all the parts of a cell and you put them into a vat, they're not going to form into a cell?
Right. Yeah. If you put a frog into a blender and blend that thing and then say, well, we have all the molecular requirements here for a frog.
Like, it's like, was it flu or was it Crick? Can't remember which one it was. I think probably Crick said that the chances of coming up of a DNA molecule, okay, a human DNA molecule, which is 3 billion elements long, okay, it's 6 foot long if you stretch it out, but that's how long that molecule is. The chances of that happening on its own is like having a hurricane blow through a junkyard and ending up with a completely assembled 747. It's even worse than that.
Yeah, I think that was Hoyle. Wasn't it Hoyle?
It was Crick or flu. I heard flu.
I think it was Fred Hoyle. I wouldn't put a lot of money on my memory, but
I know Flu said it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Flu did say it.
But I don't know if he.
But I think he was quoting
copying something.
According to Hoyle.
But that's amazing. That's how complicated it is.
Yeah.
Crick, after he won the Nobel Prize, within a matter of years, started publishing on panspermia. Just immediately recognized that this thing we just discovered and got the Nobel Prize for came about by chance on this planet? No. And he started publishing arguing for.
You familiar with panspermia?
Yeah.
Everybody familiar with that?
That's right. What?
Panspermia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That means that life came here from outer space.
Somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Okay. There's 2 types of that. One category is that it is a undirected panspermia. Something else got loose, some life form, something like that, and was transported here. And bingo, that's what we got. And it started to reproduce and all this and that. you know, it's, and then the other one is directed panspermia, the little green men. We're a zoo. And that's the two types of panspermia that are being suggested or promoted just because of what you said.
Yeah.
That it
But
couldn't be
even with that light that was transported from someone else had to be created.
Sure.
So.
Boom.
You're just kicking the can down the road.
That's
But
the problem.
what it does is it opens, if you view it origin of life on a universal scale, it opens up the space and time to allow more probabilities
But
than a
what the-
little tiny ball of Earth.
But
But still, it's
the thing they were hoping for, you know, and this is why they hate the Big Bang. Some people do, some scientists do, atheists do, is because it took, you know, it's very quick for us to get life on this planet, in 4.5 billion years. That's pretty quick compared to what had to happen to get us here.
Since the sun,
But
since the
that-
solar system.
Okay,
Yes.
now you're back 4.5
I'm
billion.
going to pause and for just a second. I think we can stop the recording.
You want to stop the recording?
Yeah, I think we can talk about this. I just don't know that anybody listening to this on the video
No.
is going to want to
Say
follow.
goodbye to the people.
So people, folks, we're signing off here. Thank you all very much.